YouTube. Yeah. So welcome. This is class 4 of 5 on the 5 hindrances, and we're using the story The Wizard of Oz as a reference point, and kind of thinking about how these hindrances show up in that movie. Hi, welcome. So last week we talked about restlessness and worry. And I just want to say, again, just this invitation to kind of hold the hindrances in a few ways. One is as about energy. Energies that directed, like of what you want, energies that directed at getting away or pushing away from something. So that's the greed or the desire and the aversion. So it's you can feel it in the body, right? Thanks, Gus. And so, this is energy. It's a momentum, right? And then restlessness is worry is too much energy. Too much energy in the body or too much energy in the mind. And a way to think about, for me, the container, how the mind is holding something, impacts also the energy. So if you think about a bouncing ball in a small space, if it keeps it has something to bounce against, it's going to keep going, right? Longer and longer. If it's a really small, tight space, it goes boom, 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 boom. If the space is really big, it's not going to keep going for as long because it doesn't keep having this resistance or this pressure to keep it going. So if we can broaden the space in our minds, our hearts, to be with whatever's going on, it can help lessen that intensity of energy in the body and the mind. I'll just say this about Sloth and Torpor, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. And another way you can think about what happens when you have too much space. Like if you imagine you have all day, 2 weeks, 1 month of nothing you have to do. Sometimes we just kind of get immobilized because there's too much space. There's not enough kind of something to push against or move us toward, right? So in an opposite way, sloth and torpor might be too much space in the mind or in the structure of our life or in the space permission we're giving ourselves even. So energy, right? So if we have too much space, maybe we lose our energy, it flattens. Too little space, it can create a tighter environment for reactivity and the buildup of excessive energy. So this idea of the energy helps kind of us see, I think, kind of fine-tune our relationship with these hindrances, not as something horrible that's haunting us or, that we're bad. It's more about, like, again, to me, seeing it as feedback. Like it's a reflection of what's happening within in some way or another. And if we can recognize it, we can go, oh, maybe I need to put a little more attention here, or maybe I need to take off a little bit of the tension here. Or if I'm leaning too much into something, like, oh, yeah, remembering where that leads us. And the same with the aversion. Another way to think about the hindrances is that they're veils. They cover something. And the teachings in the time from the time of the Buddha and the suttas, occasionally you'll see these references that the mind itself is pure and bright. Just that's the natural nature of the mind. And so, what if there's something covering that? What if we all have this, and there's things that cover it, that prevent us from kind of seeing clearly to it or through it? And the Buddha gave similes having to do with water for each of the hindrances. And so a mind clear of hindrances is described as a very clear pool of water. So you can look in, you can see and penetrate, and see the rocks and the fish and the algae, and it's clear to you what it is and what's happening in there. You could see a reflection without distortion, right? If you have desire in the mind, the veil is kind of equated to dye, like a color, crimson red or something, put in the water. And so it tints, right? Just like sunglasses. I had somebody who came to this class and we were talking about this, and I was talking about, tinting, wearing sunglasses affects the colors that you see, right? And so he had this huge aha moment because he ran through a red light or a green light. He must have stopped at a green light because the tinting in his glasses turned the green to like what looked like red. So the color, the way we're seeing can impact how we perceive what we're looking at. So if we're looking into the pond and it's all rosy, it might make us think, oh, it's so beautiful. Look at how the fish is this color and it's, purple, and instead it's just, gray or something. And the impact or the veil of ill will in the water is like boiling water. So you can't see into it because the water is not still, and it's also hot and dangerous, right? So you can't even really get close to it. So the veil, prevents us from seeing. With restlessness and worry, it's like wind on a lake, right? Really kicks up the waves, and it's choppy and the water is disturbed, so you can't see clearly. And with sloth and torpor, it's equated with like algae, right? Sludge. It makes it hard to move, hard to see. It's like, have you ever had algae water? It's not easy to clear out. It's just not easy. I've had fish tanks, right? And, even if you wipe off the glass, the water is filmy. There's a lot of work to trying to get it clean. And usually you just have to get rid of most of the water, clean out the rocks, clean the glass, and leave some in for the pH balance. But, it's this long process. It can take a while. You might have to change the water a few times. So the veil, I like this idea of the nature of the mind, the nature of the heart is radiant and free of these things. And conditions, just like weather, happen in our lives. And they're going to disturb that capacity to see through, see with, see into with that kind of clarity and brightness. And we're using the Wizard of Oz as a reference. And I say we, Diana's not here tonight because she's sick, so hopefully she'll be back next week for the last class. But we wanted to, Diana and I, when we've taught this before, we have this idea, let's demystify these hindrances. Let's not make them into bad things. If you actually see, I've said this before, but think about it. If you see clearly what's happening, you can pull the veil back, the curtain back. And who does this in The Wizard of Oz? Who reveals? Toto, right? I mean, here's this wizard hiding. Have you seen the movie? Oh, yeah. So the wizard, right, just this little guy making up lots of stories, intimidating people, pretending to have power, hides behind this curtain, and then has this projected head with this flame coming out of it, speaking in this deep, demanding voice. And Toto's like, to me, the little symbol of mindfulness, right? Sort of this clear ability to see. And he just runs over there and pulls the curtain back and reveals the wizard. And that revealing lets us see. It's a pathway to freedom. If we can see it, we can relate to it, we can know, and we can be free from it. Remember how frightened they were when they were visiting the wizard as he was, booming voice, and they're all shivering and quivering, and you pull back that curtain and you realize, wow, this is make-believe. And how often do we make ourselves shiver and quiver because of our mental mind imagining, creating these intensities, these stories? And if we can recognize what we're doing, we can pull our own curtain back and free ourselves from the wizards of the world in our own mind. So does anyone want to say anything about working with restlessness and worry this past week, or any reflections from the class from last week before we kind of move into Sloth and Torpor in the context of Wizard of Oz and then in the context of the Dharma? No? Great.
It's not related to restlessness.
That's okay.
I was just going to ask, because you were just talking about like revealing the curtain and like similarly revealing things in our life that were like covered before. And as you were saying that, I was just thinking like the example you gave in The Wizard of Oz, it's like a very clear thing that gets revealed. But like often I feel like things are way more complicated, especially when you look like different perspectives and how like someone sees something versus another person. And it's usually not as straightforward as like, oh, this person did this to me. It might be like, oh, they were feeling this way and they reacted this way, which made me feel this. It's like, I don't know. I feel like it gets very muddy. And I don't know if you have any thoughts around, I don't know. I think I struggle a little bit in general with like meditation and like doing raft and things like that. Because I just feel like there's usually not this very clear path towards like walking through my feelings or emotions or like processing events and revealing things when I don't know. Like, yeah, I just feel like I don't know how to do it well.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of things to say. So what can I say right now? A couple of, remember that when we're doing mindfulness, we can only do mindfulness of our own experience, right? We can only really be mindful of what we're sensing in our bodies, what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and know that we're seeing things, but from our own perspective. We can't know exactly what anyone else is seeing, thinking, feeling. We can be sensitive and empathic and pick up on stuff, but truly it's only the other person that can. And we don't have to agree. We can be in the same room, in the same time, same things happening, and have two very different experiences. And there's stories, I don't remember who the monks are, but there's stories from some monks, right, who are practitioners in Europe. I don't remember. They were traveling together, and they were talking later about these events that they shared, and they all had really different stories, really different perceptions of the experience. And that's just the reality of life. So if we're trying to make everything match up with other people and their experience, somebody's always trying to then distort their own experience. All of our experience is colored and influenced by our history, our personality, the way we see and relate, how our mind thinks. Some people think, in images, some people think in words. Some people don't really think in either. Our minds are unique, and our histories are unique, and the way we even define something is impacted by everything behind us. So maybe if you try and simplify and really get clear that all you need to know is what's going on for you, what your truth is. It doesn't mean it's that capital T truth, but it means that you can settle with something because you know what's true for you. Does that make sense? Yeah. The other thing I'll say is that in May, the last 3 weeks of May, not all, because I'm doing an intro series after this one. But in May, I'm doing raft, just for 3 weeks, just raft. And I'm hoping to do some practices where people are willing to have me guide them through it and share out loud what's happening, so I can guide you through more. So come back in May. All right. So let's talk about Sloth and Torpor and the Wizard of Oz for a moment. So Sloth, right, is the physical aspect of this hindrance. It's the heaviness, the frozenness, the not being able to move or get up, you know. And so who in the Wizard of Oz is stuck, slow? The Tin Man, right? He's rusted shut. He can't move. Right? He's just talking out of the corner of his mouth. And, you know, so he needs to be oiled and greased. and then if you watch him, right, he kind of has a sadness to him. There's a little bit of a, you know, a little bit of a sadness to his face. And, you know, there's a way in which I think depression is a little bit like the torpor, right? And the energy in the body and the energy in the mind kind of affect the way he speaks. So he's kind of like slowly, his head's kind of sideways, and, you know, just sort of his affect is the opposite of the straw man. The straw man who has all kinds of restlessness and worry, right? All kinds of extra energy. His mood will swing from this to that rapidly. The Tin Man, no, you don't see that, right? So this is a kind of an example of how more sloth and torpor manifest and look. Just this sort of flatter, slower, kind of, you know-ness. Sad, subdued, maybe. And torpor and sloth, actually, you know, they don't mean you don't have energy. They mean you're not accessing your energy. One, you know, you've seen how people can go from no energy to tons of energy at the snap of a finger because something interesting comes along or something that excites them happens, right? So that energy was there, it just wasn't accessed because their mind wasn't turned on, or their ideas and beliefs weren't, you know, positive and energetic. And what is it that this Tin Man is telling himself? What does he tell Dorothy and the straw man? He just says he doesn't have a heart. He tells himself he has no heart, and he tells them he really believes he has no heart. But yet he's sad, and he's romantic, and he's longing a partner, right? You don't feel those things if you have no heart. But he's telling himself he has no heart, and he believes his story. And when we believe the stories we tell ourselves like this, it affects our energy, affects our mood and our bodies and our minds. And think about, what is it like to imagine not having a heart, not having an emotional connection? What does life look like? Gray. Really, you know, lacking vibrancy, right? And that's kind of how he presents, lacking vibrancy. It's so pithy. I think it's so pithy what they've done in this story with these characters, actually. And it's quite extreme, you know, and the story is kind of wild. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, wow, this is such a great way to tell us about the way we are, you know. So there's another person in the story who tells himself that he can't do things, and things are too hard, they're too dangerous, and it affects him and his energy in some ways. It's a little different. But I wonder about the lion. And I wonder if there's some way, you know, he certainly has, you know, worry. But does he also have some sloth and torpor in there that kind of are impacting him? We can have multiple hindrances. And then there's one other really poignant example of sloth and torpor, and that's the field of poppies. Right? Drugs, right? Poppy opiates. It's like we, opiates make us feel like it's a warm hug, and we fall asleep and we lounge around, and they essentially go into this field and they all fall asleep, right? So they're lacking awareness in the mind and body. Another example of how, whether it's drugs or what we're doing, that can induce states of coma-like consciousness. Yeah. So now I kind of shift, wait, who has other ideas? Anybody else have other ideas from the story that might reflect sloth and torpor? No? If you do, if anything pops up, feel free to share. So within the Dharma, I talked about, the pond, the algae-filled pond, right, as a simile taught by the Buddha. And, I've been sort of talking about, the sloth and torpor comes from, really a lot of it can come from our mind, the way we're thinking about things, the perspective we have on things, how tight we are around things, or how slack we are, how much permission giving we are giving ourselves, And so the sloth is the physical, the torpor is the mind, the dull, cloudy, weary, easily drifting into thought. There's something that Gill calls the sinking mind, which is related to torpor in the mind. And it actually, in deeper meditation, it can be a little bit seductive and pleasant. It's like this feeling of just, I don't know, like sinking, right? Just this sinking feeling, and just not even knowing you're not aware because you're so, I don't know, lost. Yeah. And so when it's really strong, there can be, insufficient mindfulness to even know we're in it. So when, emotional energies or attitudes also affects our energy, like a feeling of discouragement, frustration, boredom, or even indifference, right? Boredom to me is a lack of connection in the present moment. It's not being present. And indifference to me is a form of hostility, really, I feel. Or there's a feeling, giving up can induce sloth and torpor, hopelessness, right? And the other thing is resistance. When we're resisting something, we can find ourselves in a tension, a space of tension that immobilizes us in a way, right? So if something needs to happen and we think it needs to happen, but we can't do it and we won't do it, we can get stuck, immobilized. It can also come up when we have a sense of not feeling satisfied, gratified. It can come up when we feel like there's no benefit to us in whatever's happening. Some people, or all of us probably, to some extent, are really motivated when we feel like we're being seen in a favorable way. And when we don't feel that way, when we don't feel like, we're being acknowledged or important, it can be very easy to shut down and kind of shift into a sloth and torpor space. So there's a few more things to say, but I think I'll move to practice tips, and I kind of want it because I'm going to have you guys talk, right, in your small group, and I want to give you room to name some of this stuff, right? It's fun. So just some simple practice tips. Always, for me, it's always the first thing is to name it, to be aware of it. We have to recognize it, right? So the raft are, recognize mindfulness, bring awareness to it. And then the second part is the A, which is to allow it to be there. So if we're struggling with it, we're not going to see it clearly. It's like adding waves to the water. We've got to find a way to allow it to be seen as it exists already, to give it space, birth. And maybe I'll save the other tips for after you guys do a little small group discussion, so we can kind of, talk about that. So I think, with there's 5 of you, so why don't you just be one group, And you can just sort of make a little circle back there and go ahead and do that. Just turn your chairs, whatever. I don't mean like you have to go, but like just, it's probably easier on that side of the room. And I'll just invite you first to go around the circle and say your names and a little bit about your relationship to IMC or to practice, and where you live maybe. And then I'll give you the first question. This is just sort of get to know your Dharma friends. All right. And so let me just see, how does this question land for you guys, right? I'm open to, we can fine tune. So the first question would be kind of, how do you experience sloth and torpor? Just in general, exploring and sharing a little bit. And think about it, how it shows up in your mind, how it shows up in your body, and where it shows up. Just sort of reflect a little bit, let yourself connect with how it comes into your life. And so just take turns one at a time. I think one at a time. Or let me ask, would you rather say one way and then go to the next person and hear what they say? Like to help generate ideas? Or would you rather be able to talk by yourself just for a couple of minutes and let yourself free flow? What would you prefer? You,
No, whichever way. You make a call.
oh.
In your experience, as an experienced planner.
I've never done this exact moment in time before, so I have no experience with this moment.
Very present.
Okay, how about we start with 2 rounds, lightning rounds, where you just drop in 1 or 2 things that you're aware of, just like a short little thing, just to help you get the juices go. And then the 3rd round, each person take a little longer to say a little bit more. How does that sound? Great.
Just in life also, or just during our practice?
No, hey, the hindrances show up everywhere.
pressure.
No pressure. We can all lean in if you don't want to use the mic.
I've just become much more aware recently of listening to my body and feeling things in my body. And certainly when I'm meditating, I'm far more aware of nowadays of sloth and torpor showing up, sloth showing up as kind of a very imperceptible slouch, and also a fairly imperceptible change of the attitude of my head. So anyways, lightning round, you're next.
Oh, yeah, there we go. I want to know, do they have to go together? No. I mean, that's a rhetorical question, but they don't always go together. And for me, it turns up a lot when things are too hard. If I'm thinking about something and it's too hard and I don't want to deal with it. So I don't.
Yeah, this one is difficult for me to identify, but I think I'm going to go with the stuckness in a lot of my emotions, where I get exhausted and then just lay out, basically.
For me, it shows up with ruminations. It's sort of like a byproduct of those.
I was going to say, I guess this is a case where it doesn't go together, but I guess this is sloth, like just procrastination. Like I'll have something running through my mind of like, I got to do this, and then I just never physically get to doing it.
You could also kind of watch how far you're into the ice cream container. You're trying to avoid things. I think also with respect to torpor, kind of a couple of you guys have made this point. Again, listening to my body, sometimes if I'm not doing something that I feel like I should be doing, I'll start to sense tension in my body. And it's weird because tension and torpor don't seem to go together, but to the extent that I'm not being present with something that I feel that I should be present with, I'll actually start to feel it in my body. I'll start to feel it as a tension.
I think I practice sloth and torpor every day because 8 or 9 o'clock comes at night and I don't want to deal. And I lay down on the couch and I watch Netflix. And I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to deal with anything. And I kind of like it. I don't do it during the day, and then it's sort of helpful to end the day that way. So it's not all bad or a hindrance sometimes.
To piggyback off of that, I'm like going all day, that I experience the same thing, but also the long to-do list is waiting. You're like, okay, well, I don't have enough energy right now. I'm going to listen and rest, but am I being lazy? Should I do the 5 things that I need to get done by tomorrow? So that's how I experience it as well.
Yeah, for me, it's usually follows an afternoon nap, and I'll lay there and just allow my body to feel this deep sense of relaxation. I don't know if that's sloth and torpor. It may, but it's a very nice state of, like you, Susan. It's a very nice state to be in. And then all of a sudden, mindfulness kicks in, and there's all these things to do, and then just step out of that and go on with the rest of the day.
Yeah, I think similar to what everyone said, I feel like I consume media a lot to like stop thinking, which I don't know if that's a form of torpor. But then I don't feel like it has the benefits maybe that you said you feel. Like I feel like it kind of makes things worse or makes me feel worse instead.
Sorry, I'm still on the body thing, but I think sloth and torpor kind of go together. They kind of happen together. I have I can potentially sit down and be on YouTube for hours, you know. But what I've learned recently, and you know, I'll be splayed out on my couch watching nice big screen, watching YouTube. You're familiar with this. And I think everybody's familiar, Netflix, YouTube. What I realized recently is if I just get up, if I just stand up, it changes everything. And, you know, I'll go turn off YouTube and I'll get on with my life. I don't even know where I'm going, but just the getting up, because I tell myself this is not what I want. And then without any real way to kind of think about it, you know, I can't think my way through it. I'm in the state. I'm kind of like the Tin Man. I'm stuck. And what I've realized is I just randomly just pop up. And in popping up, all of a sudden the mind state changes. And I think they happen kind of together. And so then both the sloth and the torpor kind of, they recede.
I don't know that there's
Have we
more.
done 2 rounds?
What happens now? And you guys have more?
Yeah, just, is there a natural end to it? Great. And it sounds like, you know, that nobody needs to wax on about it, right? So, so then let's move to question 2. And question 2 is what I'd like to invite you to do is to talk about activities and topics, etc., that bring a sense of vitality to you and your life. And then also to talk about, maybe you should start with I don't know what way you want to go. Let's end with this vitality, I think. But the other is, and what topics or activities leave you feeling dull, drained, or lifeless? So, what's that?
YouTube.
YouTube, right. Does me, for sure. So just, and you can, so like, you know, it doesn't have to be lightning, but you can do similarly, and you can talk a little more if you want to reflect and share more than one thing at once. And just allow yourselves to connect. But you could do, maybe we do a first round of what brings energy, vitality, and then a second round of what brings a lack of it, the opposite, and then let's go back to vitality. Does that sound good? Okay.
So I have a dog, and we walk. Sometimes she looks at me like, I don't want to walk, but I love being outside, and even if it's the same route, I'm happy to be outside, and it's mostly 3 times a day, and sometimes it's early in the morning or later at night and during the day, and it's fine with me.
Wonderful.
That's my energy for the moment.
I love it. I too have been not trying to watch so much sports or TV or even have this TV on as background noise. So I find myself cooking or walking, sitting at a park and on the bench, reading a book, or catching up with a close friend that's on my to-do list.
I find swimming is one of my favorite activities. I swim first thing in the morning, not only twice a week, but it's enough to carry me through the entire week. And when I start bogging down, I go off to the gym and work out. I find it a real excessive workout, a good workout. It just, you know, it really puts a lot of energy in the body. You know.
Yeah, I think similar to everyone, like movement definitely helps in whatever form. And sometimes if I'm really like, because I'm trying to like wean myself off of like TikTok and the really like addictive apps. So I'm like, okay, a podcast is like a step down. So I'll like listen to a podcast while I do some movement. So at least I'm not like stuck in one place. Helps a little. Yeah.
How many of the TikToks have you gone by where they remind you not to stay on? Yeah, exactly. So I take it off my phone. And then if I want to do it, I'll put it on, and then I take it off my phone. So, I mean, you guys have heard me say this before, but what really energizes me nowadays is the arts, just pursuing the arts. Museums. I'm now in a choir. I like going to symphonies. I like going anything that is performing arts. I find very energizing. I'm planning a trip to the Getty Museum this summer too, which will be a hoot.
So what does not energize me? I have this habit in the morning that after I walk the dog, while I drink my coffee, I go through my emails, and then I look at Facebook. And it's always so unsatisfying, and I think, why do I do this every day? But it's such a habit, and I have to start, yeah. And there's nothing exciting. I do a lot of deletes.
Facebook, social media, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and TV.
Well, I think I still work quite a bit. I should be retired, but I enjoy what I do. But there are some things that I don't enjoy that I do. It really, it's like it's work that I don't want to get my hands dirty with, and my enthusiasm dries up when I have, and yet I still manage to get through it.
I was gonna say, like, during the COVID pandemic, like, work from home period, I think I had like the most sloth and torpor that I've ever had, and I have I'm in a more physical kind of field where I need to like go into the office. So during those like 3 months that I was at home, I just laid around all day, and yeah.
I'm semi-retired, and there's certain tasks also of the work that I do, which is like, oh God. It's like you're having all my teeth pulled at the same time, and it still has to get done.
So this is more energy? Yeah. More energy. I'm a people person, and although I can be home, I live alone and not talk to anybody for 4 days, then I think, and I'm not bored. I think I'm boring, but I'm not bored. And then I think, I like the world. I'm going to get out in the world. And the other thing I do a lot is travel. And that for me is, it's so everything. It's educational, it's experience, it's fabulous. And I'm very lucky that I can do it. So I'm going to Turkey.
Cool.
Yeah. More energy. Yeah.
We're back to question one.
Question one.
Yeah. I have found myself like getting rid of stuff that just sits there that you don't use. So decluttering, and also shifting the energy with the furniture that I have. It brings me a lot of joy.
And I have nothing more to offer. Thanks.
I know, I'm trying to think of things. Yeah, I think definitely like talking to people if that's available. Another thing I've been doing recently is like instead of social media from my phone, I'll go on like Google Maps and find like interesting restaurants or like things. I'll just be like, oh, cool, I didn't even know this stuff existed around me. I don't know if that starts to fall into like the desire category, but it helps with the sloth and torpor, I guess.
I don't know if I have another one. I mean, I like doing projects around the house, and I don't do them all the time, but when I get started with one, it's always very energizing. I just like doing projects, and then when they're done, I like going back and looking at them 10 times and just saying, wow, wasn't that a nice job?
Nice. And what happened to your energy just during this time? During your time sharing here?
Pleasant.
Pleasant.
It
Yeah.
was soft.
Soft.
Comfortable. Comfortable.
Comfortable.
Also tight.
Also tight when you're thinking about the things that
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
don't energize you.
Right. So you noticed in your body, and it was so funny because I was watching your body language from the back. When I was asking about start with positive, go to the lack, and you were like, yeah, go back to the positive. Yeah, and just thinking about these things affects what you feel in your body, right? Yeah, just remarkable to notice that, I think. So, is there anything else you guys want to share with each other, or any key takeaways? Maybe just do another round with the mic. Just what's your takeaway from your sharing, your experience, your own reflections, or what you heard? You know, how might this support you in your practice, whether it's daily life or on the cushion?
Yeah. I'm not alone. And that's a very important part of compassion, self-compassion, I think. None of us is weirdly separate and doing shit that you wish other people didn't see all the time. We're all in this together. We're all dealing with it. And I think that is good for both compassion for others and, more importantly, self-compassion. I'm always passing it to you. Do you want me to pass it somewhere else?
I think I was just going to say, like, coming into the session, I was like, oh, I don't really know if I'm going to relate that much to sloth and torpor. Like, I related a lot to, like, worry and anxiety from the last session, because I just feel like that's my baseline. But, like, after hearing more about it and, like, talking about it, I'm like, yeah, I do have a lot of that, like, sometimes stemming from the worry and anxiety that leads me into it, which is interesting. And then also trying to avoid it makes me go into like other hindrances, which is interesting. So yeah.
Question again?
Just a takeaway.
Well, the one takeaway for me is just what I'm feeling at this moment is just be more in the present moment. I think that's one of the best enhancements for getting out of that place of sloth and torpor, just being in the present moment. As soon as I notice it, then I take evasive action on it.
This is the most challenging hindrance for me to recognize. I'm recognizing that.
Identifying it, I mean, naming it. I have identified it, but naming it, the couch with Netflix, you know, that kind of thing. It's, yeah. And so that's always helpful to actually look at it and not just live it every day.
Nice. Just thank each other, and maybe we can come back to the semi-large circle.
It's intimate.
Yeah. So let me ask you, would you like to do the guided practice now, or would you like me to talk a little bit about some of the antidotes? Antidotes? Okay, great, because it's all fresh in your mind. Okay. So before I go into that, I just want to say a couple more things. So one of the things that can happen is that if we have something going on that we're not really ready to face, or it feels like too much, it's often, sloth and torpor will arise. And there can be some wisdom to that. So, I think we have to, at certain times when we know there's a lot going on, there can still be things being processed, right? So it's really asking the question, is it hindering me in some way? Or is what needed is a little bit more stillness? Right? And one of the key ways to figure that out is notice after you rest, Do you feel any lighter or better? And if you don't and you feel heavier, you probably need to be moving more, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, Susan? So this idea that, again, I'll repeat this, there can be times in our lives where there's something that's going on that we don't want to deal with. It could be a task you brought up, Joe, like something that you don't want to do at work. And so it brings up this, like, ugh, right? But and you guys both talked about just doing it, right? And you get through it and you feel better. And that's a good indicator that that's the right thing to do. There can also be big things going on in our life, like breakups or, people dying or something like that, that feel overwhelming, that feel like it's almost too hard to be with it. And so sometimes a result can be that sloth and torpor come up. And sometimes I think there's some wisdom in that. So, but we still need to discern, because we can also go down in the sinking hole, right? And get really heavy weighted and not move and not do things that we need to be doing to take care of ourselves, right? So I just wanted to bring some ideas, some balance, and to the idea of, like, it's not always bad to be in sloth and torpor, right? Sometimes there's a needed rebalancing, right? Or a need to kind of shut down a little bit. And part of that is due to an imbalance. Susan, I think what you were talking about, you like to get to the end of the night and watch Netflix because you described a busy, 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 busy. Maybe there's an imbalance between effort and relaxation as we're going about life. So if we're putting, and Cassandra, I think you said this too, right? If we're doing too much, we can kind of collapse into sloth and torpor. And so what happens if we try and build more balance, more rest, more breaks in our daily routine, so we're not driving so hard, and then just sort of collapse, right? So finding that balance between effort and relaxation is part of the antidote, right? And you already named many of the things I'm going to say. One was just, Gus, you talked about just standing up. I have that experience, where I'll just be like, I'm just done. I don't even have words for it. I'm just like, I can't do this anymore, and I just stand up, or I, turn off the TV, or I shut my computer because I'm just done, right? And it could be anything. And shifting just changes, can help change and get me out of it. And like you said, Cassandra, you said it's hardest to recognize. And that's because it is that kind of there's a real heaviness that inhibits our capacity to really recognize with clarity what's going on. So some things to do are arouse energy, particularly before you're going to meditate, okay? So this is for an example, or before you need to do something that's hard for you to do. Go for a brisk walk, right? Sit more upright. Open your eyes. Wash your face with cold water. Open a window. Cool down. Heat, right? So, and if you're, can make yourself a little bit uncomfortable, whatever you're doing, so you're not just sinking into the couch or sinking into your meditation cushions. Don't get too comfortable. It sort of invites that falling asleep state. Another thing to do is to investigate, drop in some questions. Like, if I had energy now, I would ... What would you do if you had energy right now? And then, what is it I really want right now? Like sometimes we're not getting what we really want, and we're not really acknowledging that, so we're tuning out. So what is it I really want, or what is it I really don't want right now? Like, to help us name it, right? Another practice is to reflect on death and dying, right? To think about, life is short. What does it mean? What's the purpose and meaning in our life and our practice? So to, reflect on the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, things that bring a sense of purpose, inspiration, and connect you with the preciousness of life. And no matter what, just keep practicing. Don't get up and walk away just because you're having a bout of sloth and torpor. Don't walk away from your practice. Walk away from your TV, not your practice. Any thoughts, any additions? Anything else you want to add? Gus, great. Just get the mic, would you? Thank you.
From what you said, it sounds like there's a space for mindful sloth.
Say more.
It's what you were saying about you may not be in the right space to be active, but you can be mindful that what you need right now looks like a hindrance, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's what you need.
Yeah, that's right. And
Yeah.
and so it's you know how when there are times your energy can arise right away, but there might be other states and times where it's more because you end up finding out you were sick, you didn't realize you were getting sick, So there sometimes, if your energy won't shift and you try these things, maybe you're just tired, or maybe there's just too much and you need rest. Yeah. So it's discernment, I guess. It's hard to say mindful sloth and torpor. It's hard to, but mindful of it, and then exploring, investigating what's needed, and how do I respond if I do this? How do I respond if I do that? That make sense? Thank you. Anything else?
I don't know if it's my age or what, but when you said, rest during the day and there's a balance. So growing up, it was like, I'll go the other way. As I'm old, I have given myself permission to nap during the day if I want. I've retired a couple of years ago, but I never would have done that, ever. The day was filled with doing things, and never would I do that. And when I first started giving myself permission to do that, I thought, this is great. I love this.
Yeah.
So it depends on also where you are in your life. And now I know that people, you have to be happy in your workplace, and you should, and there should be a balance. But when I work, you just worked. So it's a whole different thing, I think.
Yeah, and different generations have different
Yeah.
attitudes about it, because some of the younger people I work with are, I'm not doing that. They're
Right,
like, I'm not doing that. I watch you do that. No way, thank you.
That's right, and that's what I mean. And I never would have said that.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So, yeah.
But we all have to look at our own patterns.
Yeah.
What's the conditioning? Because there's also other things. Actually, there are other messages people get that make it more okay or less okay for them to rest. That, in some parts of our, culture, there are, people who experience tremendous pressure to kind of always having to be on and to look good and to present smart, because they're pushing against a lot of stereotypes or other barriers in their life. So there are a lot of reasons that cause people to have various attitudes about it, whether it's okay to nap or not okay to nap. And there's been some books and writings about the sort of rest as revolution, rest as kind of a way to take back one's power, so especially in the Black community. But yeah, any other wonderful reflections, thoughts? Yeah, Gus, great.
I have a hard time with the death and dying part of it. Sometimes I'll think to myself, hey, you're 67 years old. It's not like, you have an infinite amount of time left here. What are you going to do? Absolutely does not work for me. It just doesn't.
Good. Well, it's good to
Yeah.
know, right? What does work for you? So what does inspire you, Gus?
That has something that is not what that does to me. What that does to me is it makes me feel kind of guilty that I should be doing certain things. It has a negative connotation, right? Thou should do this, right? Doesn't work for me. So
Yeah.
it has to be positive. It has to be onward leading.
Yeah.
I have a hard time with that one.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment.
Thank you. Yeah, and none of these are, the answers for everybody, right? And this is the beauty of the Buddha's teaching. It's about trying and then reflecting. I love the teaching that the Buddha gave to Rahula, right? This is his son. His son was pretty young and maybe had lied to somebody. And so the Buddha gave him a talking and said, Rahula, before you speak, reflect and think about whether this might cause harm to yourself, others, or both. And then during your speaking, Rahula, reflect. Is what I'm saying causing harm to myself, to others, or both? And then after I'm done speaking, reflect again. Because, our awareness can change over that period of time. And so this practice is really about, it's not just about intentions. It's not just about doing what you're told to do, but reflect, learn as you go along, notice. And there's never, it's like the effort and the things we need to do are always changing because our conditions are changing. What we need one day, we might need different something another day. And we have to keep not going into automatic pilot. That takes us away from the vibrancy of our life, but keep checking in, keep reflecting, listening, noticing the impact. Yeah. Okay, let's do raft. At this point, it'll be fairly short. So the raft is the recognize, allow, feel, tease apart, and then trust. My extra T is trusting. And you don't have to go through the whole thing. Again, it might be that it's enough just to recognize something. So don't try and make something happen in your practice, right? Allow yourself to notice what's happening as we practice. So, taking a moment to feel your body, feel your feet, kind of be the snow globe that got set down. Let the snowflakes come to settle, coming home, connecting with the present moment. So this is going to be an interesting thing, right, to try and practice with sloth and torpor, which can be hard to be aware of. So let's see if we can do it from a perspective of kind of more of the observing mind. So just drop in the question and see if your mind can offer you a memory of a time where you really didn't have energy, you didn't have mental clarity, you didn't have the mindfulness, where you were kind of in that sinking space. And remember you're here now as you see this memory. And if you could just wiggle your fingers to let me know when you've got something in mind, so I know when it's okay to shift. Okay, I think I got all fingers wiggled. So just seeing this moment in your history, your experience, whether it was recent or not, just kind of seeing it as clearly as possible, recognizing the lighting, the time of day, the location. Notice what's happening. Notice if you yawn or start to feel sleepy, just even being aware of that as you start to check in. Notice how your body's feeling as you're bringing it to mind. And can you practice the recognition? Like, I see you. And, is it feel right to say, I see you, sloth and torpor, I see you, lack of energy, I see you, boredom, disinterest, whatever it is that feels like naming, looking in the eyes of this energy, seeing it in such a way that it feels seen. And then there's a movement here when the time is right to this ability to allow that experience to be there. So it's not endorsing it. It's not like jumping in that pool, saying this is great. And it's not saying it's bad. It's just saying, allowing yourself to sense and be with this experience with as much mindfulness as possible right now. And if there's resistance to it, ask yourself if it's needed. Maybe it's helping a little bit not fall into the sinking hole of it. If it's not needed, maybe invite the resistance to relax. And as there's willingness in the system, moving to feeling it in the body. Moving away from the stories or the imagery. And noticing maybe a body scan of how it's impacting the energy in your body. Starting at the top of the head and noticing the forehead, the eyes, the jaw, the neck, shoulders. Just feeling if there's a heaviness about wanting to lean forward or back, or just continuing to move down the body in your own time. Trying to be as aware of possible in the present moment. Connecting with the experience, not the story, as much as possible. And when you're ready, when there's clarity, or if you need to bring a little more energy into the practice, the next part would be to allow this space, maybe a big table with chairs and a room, and allow the different parts that are coming together to make and create this experience of sloth and torpor, to have their own seat at the table. And just first naming whatever seems obvious. We don't need to pull on the strings. More, we allow space for things to unfold, to reveal themselves. And just pulling back, if you can, in your mind's eye a little bit, just to have that bird's eye view of that moment in time. Bird's eye view of the ability to see what led up to, what contributed. thoughts, feelings, beliefs, people, situations, lack of sleep. Just allowing those things to be seen and invited to sit at the table. There's nothing that can't be here, right? This practice is about allowing ourselves to be with, not consumed by, not collapsing into, but allowing things to have their own space. And as you look around the table, just drop in the question to the room. Is there anything you need me to know about you, to any of these visitors? Is there anything I need to know about you? And as much as possible, having the grace and the capacity to appreciate each part and whatever it has to share. At some point here, maybe reflect on what shifted and changed that allowed this experience to change. What shifted and changed that helped the energy and the life force kind of come back in. And what in this practice was useful for you? Can you trust the practice? Can you trust the insight, or that these things come and go, their states? And lots of times with the trusting part of raft, it's like I suggest you kind of imagine laying back. In this practice with Sloth and Torpor, I kind of invite you to imagine standing up. Reaching your arms to the sky, taking a deep breath, looking around, being in nature. And then to look back in at the table and just see how these eyes see the situation. And if there's a sense of appreciation for your effort, for your practice, maybe a bow to yourself, to your heart, your mind, for revealing whatever was revealed. So recognize, allow, which is not the same as endorsing. It's acknowledging and allowing something that already exists to be seen and felt. It's already there. It's to then maybe, if there's too much resistance to what's there, to recognize the resistance. And then allow the resistance to be felt. I kind of see it like there's this thing, and if I'm resisting it, the resistance gets between me, my awareness, and the thing. So instead of trying to do this with the thing, I work with the resistance. Just turning toward whatever resistance is there. And kind of, then you could just practice with that, or it dissipates and you're able to connect more with the thing. From there we move to feeling it in the body, right? Allowing ourselves to get in touch with how this experience, this thought is impacting our physical self. And then to allow whatever's unfolding in this process to kind of have its own room and space at this table, at this imaginary room. And the idea of the room being big enough for whatever needs to be there. And the trust to me is a reminder that things are impermanent. This is an experience, it's not me, it's not who I am, right? And that suffering actually is a guide. And if we can turn toward the suffering, we have a capacity to be free, like pulling the curtain back. We have the capacity to learn, to move toward freedom. So that was the practice. How was it working with sloth and torpor in this practice? Well, would you say a word or more about it, Susan? There's the mic right at your...
It was really interesting. I felt myself resisting that I was sitting up straighter instead of folding into myself, which I felt that day. And I thought, I'm sitting up, I'm not giving in.
And how did that change what happened?
It did, how did it change what happened?
Yeah, sitting up and not giving in.
Oh, it felt powerful.
It felt powerful. Great. Thank you.
I was really moved by this raft. An image immediately popped in my head of something that has been really traumatic for me in the last 3 months. But the beauty of it, like at the end I was out in nature with a picnic blanket with all of the things that wanted to be there. It was very moving and touching.
Did you be interested to hear how it was for you?
I think, if I remember right, you said to like remember a previous kind of memory, which I feel like was easier for me than doing something current.
Yeah.
For sure. And I feel like even like, yeah, looking at something that maybe I kind of dismissed, or like, I was like, okay, that's over, so I'm not going to think about it anymore. And kind of like, definitely like when we did the table thing, I was like, oh, there's like 6 different things I could name that were like contributing to like me shutting down in that moment.
Beautiful.
So that was really helpful. Yeah.
Beautiful. So you know how I didn't say it tonight because I was kind of tailoring for this particular hindrance, but to when we do this practice, to make sure it's not going to overwhelm whatever we're practicing with, practice with what we can be with. And it's never too late to practice with anything, because even as we're having a memory, we're having an experience in the present moment. And there's a way to process that experience in the present moment, even though we can't go back and change time. So choosing something that's historical, that's not as intense, if that's what works, it works. So I'm really glad you had that experience. Yeah, Gus, please.
These 5 probably don't happen all on their own, right?
Yeah,
They're-
absolutely,
They're mixed, right?
absolutely.
I was thinking that there seems to be some relationship between aversion and sloth and torpor, and clinging and restlessness, right? And doubt also probably is associated with sloth and torpor. So maybe, I mean, does this make sense that if you're feeling yourself in a state of sloth and torpor, could you reasonably ask yourself, what are you being aversive to right now? What are you doubting right now?
Yes, but I would say it's not just those things,
Right.
because actually excessive desiring can lead to a shutting down of sloth and torpor, right? And doubt can lead to restlessness and worry.
I
So
see that.
there's not, it's not one directional
Right.
but it's dynamic. And so always it's good to ask those kinds of questions, but don't make assumptions exactly about, oh, that's.
One-to-one correlation, yeah. Okay.
And it might be a pairing that's very consistent for you, but even then, don't lock in that it's
Okay.
right?
Oh, that's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. So, we're almost at the end. And, I just want to invite you to continue to play and experiment with your effort, what you bring to your practice, right? And that idea of more space or less space, right? Sort of in terms of the restlessness and worry, is there too much tightness, constriction? Do I need more space? If there's a lot of lack, can I bring a little bit more tension or uprightness to what's happening right now, to my attention? And you might even actually deliberately practice with way too much energy and then not enough energy, just playfully exploring what happens, just seeing in real life what happens in you. So thank you for your practice, your participation, your sharing. So delight. I look forward to our final week next week, talking about doubt and the kind of big ta-da with the Wizard of Oz. So thank you so much.